And welcome back to TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence. And now we're joined by the grant-making director of the Bush Foundation. That's an organization that invests in great ideas and the people who power them in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations. Welcome in, Jackie Statham-Allen.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you, Adrienne.
It's great to have you. So recently, the Bush Foundation announced that it's committing $100 million to seed 2 community trust funds that directly support wealth building for Black and Native communities in areas of the Midwest. That is a huge commitment. Now, what inspired the foundation to make this contribution?
Yeah, well, the foundation was inspired to make this commitment because we work to make our region better for everyone. And we feel that by addressing racial wealth gaps, that is one of the most important things that we can do for our region. And the reason why that is because the racial wealth gaps, especially for Black and Native American families, they're huge. It's profound. In 2019, the median Black household had just 13 cents of wealth for every dollar of the typical white household. And for Native Americans, that gap was 8 cents for every dollar. So as you can see, the gaps are huge, and they are a result of the lasting impact of centuries of race-based US policy.
Yeah, and it is something that is jarring for all of us, especially when you hear numbers like that and you think, what happened there? And I know a lot of people like to think, slavery, types of internment camps and all sorts of things went on, but they were so long ago, yet the racial wealth gap persists. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that is such a great point. So racial wealth gaps and wealth is generational. And so when we take a look at US-based, race-based policy that happens long ago, that impact still matters. So for instance, when we think about slavery, so of course there were profound injustices around denied human rights and freedoms and torture and death, but it's also a quantifiable economic impact. When we take a look at those unpaid wages of enslaved people and what that meant for their descendants, that's $20 trillion today. And then if we think about Native Americans and US policy, like the General Allotment Act of 1887, that put into motion a 65% decrease in the land that was held by tribes. That's 90 million acres of wealth that was denied to that community. And those are things that happened long ago, but we can also look at the Homestead Act. We could look at the GI Bill, Social Security Act. Again and again, US policy disadvantaged Black and Native American communities and it advantaged white communities. And because wealth is generational, those impacts still matter today.
Yes, definitely. They definitely do matter. And it's interesting that you say that because I think recently it might have been the Manhattan Beach, California area that there's a region of land out there that was essentially taken away from the Black owners. And now it's being given back, which is significant. But there are so many instances of that kind of just robbery and pillage that has gone on. A lot of it state and government sanctioned. And as a result, we have this racial wealth gap. And I know a lot of people will hear about it, but they don't necessarily fully appreciate what it looks like nowadays in terms of the consequences. So can you think of any kind of direct impacts that racial wealth gap has for individuals?
Oh, absolutely. So wealth is generational and wealth is a predictor for future outcomes. When someone has access to wealth, then they are better able to take advantage of opportunities like education or buying a home or starting a small business. When someone has access to wealth, then they are better able to persevere through hardships or unexpected financial difficulties. And frankly, wealthier people are healthier people. And so wealth is one of the most critical determinants in life opportunities and outcomes in our country. And so by closing wealth gaps, it can make a difference in addressing virtually all other social and economic disparities in our country.
That intersection between race and class, then you know what? It's very, very close and much aligned. So that would be something to work toward fixing, which is great that the Bush Foundation is making this huge commitment. And I know it's dedicated to seeking steward organizations to receive that 100 million and to design and manage the grant programs. And why did you seek to go through steward organizations?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm really proud of about this initiative. I think it's one of the things that really makes it unique in that this is an exercise in power sharing. So the Bush Foundation, we established the lightest of frameworks. We know that we want to address racial wealth gaps through grants to individuals, and we have suggested three contributing factors that we think can really impact wealth, which include education, home ownership, and small businesses. And we are seeking steward organizations who are going to operate those grant programs for individuals because they are the ones who are closest to the communities. They're the ones that the communities know and trust. And because we really value the expertise and the connections that steward organizations will have with the community. And we feel that we will have better, stronger, more efficient grant programs to address this enormous challenge by going with organizations that are very close to the community.
And I know that you're co-leading this $100 million commitment at the Bush Foundation, which is a huge responsibility, as I would imagine. Yeah. Now, if you can share, what will you all be looking for when it comes to selecting the stewarding organizations?
Yeah, so I am co-leading this initiative with the Lakota woman, Eileen Briggs. And what we will be looking for are organizations that have very close ties with the community. They need to have credibility. They need to understand how work that is informed by the community results in better solutions. Also, we are looking for organizations that have experience in running grant programs and organizations that can manage a 50 million or $100 million trust fund, because that will be a large challenge in receiving those funds for the community trust funds and then making sure that they are operating sound, effective grant programs for individuals.
Wow, that's still, I keep thinking about that $100 million. That is a lot. And I know this is pretty unprecedented. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Yeah, so we were inspired by the work of Edgar Villanueva and his book, Decolonizing Wealth, in which he threw out the idea, what would happen if foundations took 10% of their endowments and placed that into programs that were specifically for Black and Native American individuals to benefit from. And when we decided to do this, we reached out to Edgar and said, hey, what have you learned when, foundations have done this work? And he informed us that really we are at the forefront of this work. So we are very proud to be a part of this, and we are glad that we are part of an entire ecosystem, a movement of organizations and individuals who want to build a more just society for Americans and who want to contribute to this very profound racial wealth gap issue.
Yes, that's huge because it definitely can't be done alone. And so having organizations like the Bush Foundation make this kind of investment and commitment, that is significant. So thank you very much. I appreciate that investment. And I cannot wait to follow what it does in terms of making change. And as I also understand it, the Bush Foundation isn't just investing 100 million, but there's also an additional 50 million in funding being invested. What's that money earmarked for?
Yeah, that's right. So there's an additional $50 million that we have committed over the next 5 years to organizations through our existing grant programs. And here we will be granting 2 organizations that are addressing systemic issues around the racial wealth gap. And so understanding that through our community trust funds, we will be able to empower and provide grants to individuals, but also understanding that there are systemic reasons why individuals need these supports in order to build wealth. So the additional 50 million will go to organizations that are working on systemic issues around wealth for Native American, Black communities, and all communities of color and other communities within our region.
And as much as things right now are kind of in turmoil, we have a lot of things going on there in the Midwest, particularly in Minnesota and in Chicago. And it seems that there is really an igniting of having these conversations again about policing, about injustice, about racial division. there. And I know that that's kind of where the Bush Foundation really operates there in the Midwest in uplifting the individuals there and those voices. How would you say the Bush Foundation looks to approach these things when we have to confront them as we are doing right now?
Yeah, well, we see these things as all being related. So when we think about our initiative, which is specifically to address racial wealth gaps, we see that those wealth disparities are related to race-based US policy. And so just as there are direct through lines from broken treaties to unemployment rate and through lines from slavery to incarceration, there are also through lines from US policy to the way in which Black and brown people are interact with the police. And so we see that wealth may be a less visible way of racial injustice, but it is a very important mechanism for us to build a more just US society.
Absolutely. And the Bush Foundation will be hosting an informational webinar for potential stewarding organizations tomorrow, Tuesday, April 20th at 2 p.m. Central Time. And you can find out more at the Bush Foundation website. And where is that located, Jackie?
The www.bushfoundation.org.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.